My dear friends, when you finally rise above the chaos, when their manipulation no longer cuts through your soul, the narcissist feels something they've never felt before: fear. Not fear of you physically, but fear of losing the grip they once had over your mind. You become an unpredictable element in their controlled world. And that's when they pull out their final, dirtiest game. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's silent, calculated, and designed to make you doubt everything you've built. This last move is meant to destabilize you so quietly that you don't even realize you've been pulled into the arena again until you're already fighting shadows. The narcissist's last dirty game is psychological warfare disguised as indifference. When they see you shining, they won't confront you head-on anymore. They'll pretend you don't exist, but not in a way that gives you peace. No, their silence is crafted to make you question whether you even mattered in the first place. This game is cruel because it feeds on the most basic human desire: to be acknowledged. They will deliberately ignore your victories, act as if your achievements are meaningless, and behave like your entire existence is irrelevant. It's not that they don't see you, they see you clearer than ever. They just want to erase you without lifting a finger. In this final stage, they turn into ghosts who haunt you while pretending they've forgotten you. They'll stop reaching out, not to give you freedom, but to plant seeds of doubt in your mind. Was I ever important? Did they ever care? Was it all in my head? And while you're wrestling with these questions, they watch from a distance, satisfied that the silence is doing the work they could no longer achieve through rage or insults. This tactic is designed to trigger your longing for closure, to bait you into breaking your own silence, just so they can feel that tiny flicker of control again. It's psychological chess, and they're betting on your loneliness. They will also strategically reappear in indirect ways. You'll notice mutual friends mentioning them, or see subtle social media updates that seem too coincidental to be random. These aren't accidents, they're breadcrumbs. They want to provoke a reaction without having to face you directly. Or if you take the bait and engage, they've won. They'll use your response as proof that you're still emotionally invested, twisting the narrative to make it seem like you can't let go. This is their last dirty game, forcing you to prove your independence while secretly undermining it. The cruelest part is how they pretend to have moved on so effortlessly. They'll showcase a new relationship, a sudden career leap, or a lavish lifestyle upgrade, all perfectly timed to intersect with your moments of success. They want you to believe they've replaced you without hesitation, that they're thriving while you're still struggling to piece yourself together. It's all smoke and mirrors. Most of the time, these displays are exaggerated or entirely fabricated. But the purpose isn't truth, it's perception. If they can make you feel like you were disposable, they've planted the seed they needed. By this point, you might think they've forgotten you, but in reality, they're watching more closely than ever. They analyze your posts, your photos, your wins and losses. They might even mimic parts of your success just to compete. Narcissists don't truly let go, they just change tactics. The goal now is to remain in your mind without physically being present, to live rent-free in your head while appearing as though they've completely detached. This keeps you emotionally entangled, even in their absence. Their final game thrives on subtlety. Unlike the explosive fights or guilt-tripping of the past, this move is silent, slow-burning, and hard to prove. If you try to explain it to others, you'll sound paranoid. They're ignoring me on purpose to hurt me. But that's the genius of it. They operate in a way that's almost invisible to outsiders. No one else sees the patterns, the calculated timing, the indirect provocations. This isolation makes you feel crazy, which is exactly where they want you. It's during this stage that many people slip back into the trap. You might think, maybe I should reach out and end the tension. Maybe I should just get closure. But closure with a narcissist is an illusion. They don't want peace, they want access. The moment you break your silence, they'll slip right back into the driver's seat. They might act warm at first, but it's only to lure you into a cycle that ends with you feeling drained all over again. This is why their last game is so dangerous. It doesn't look like a game at all. Another weapon they use here is rewriting history. Since you're no longer in active contact, they'll start telling a completely different version of events to anyone who will listen. In their story, you're the villain, the unstable one, the one who couldn't handle the relationship. They play the victim, not because they believe it, but because it protects their image. And if you hear about these lies, it's not by accident. They want you to know, to stir up your anger, to tempt you into defending yourself. Once again, they bait you into breaking the silence. In some cases, they'll suddenly send a message out of nowhere, something short, cryptic, and seemingly innocent. Hey, just thinking about you, or hope you're doing well. On the surface, it looks harmless, even kind. But behind it is calculation. They're not checking on you, they're checking your emotional temperature. If you respond quickly, They know they still have a hold on you. If you ignore them, they'll escalate their indirect games to provoke you another way. Either way, they've succeeded in pulling you back into thinking about them. This is why you must understand, their final game is not about getting you back. It's about making sure you never fully move on. A narcissist can survive without your presence, but they cannot stand the thought of you being truly free from their influence. Freedom to them means you've escaped the role they cast you in, and that's something their ego cannot tolerate. They would rather be a silent shadow in your life than nothing at all. Their absence is just another mask. The true victory in this stage is not proving them wrong. It's refusing to play. You win when you stop needing them to validate your worth, your success, or your happiness. You win when their silence no longer hurts, when their indirect games fail to stir your emotions. This requires discipline, because the urge to react is strong. But every time you choose not to engage, you starve their power. Eventually, even the most persistent narcissist realizes they can't feed on someone who has closed every door. Their silence might feel like an open wound at first, but over time it becomes your greatest teacher. It forces you to find validation within yourself, to rebuild an identity that's not dependent on their recognition. The more you pour into your own growth, the more their games lose their sting. One day you'll realize you no longer care if they're watching, if they're winning, or if they've replaced you. And that's when you truly become unstoppable, because the game ends when you stop showing up to play. And here's the truth they'll never admit. When you reach that point, they lose. Not in some dramatic, cinematic way, but in the quiet collapse of their strategy. A narcissist's last dirty game only works if you're still invested in the outcome. Once you've detached, once you've built a life so full that they no longer occupy space in your mind, their power dissolves into nothing. That's the ending they fear the most. Not your anger, not your pain, but your indifference. When you no longer react to their silence, the narcissist shifts the game into something even more insidious. They plant rumors in strategic places. They don't shout them to the world. They whisper them to people they know will carry them back to you. It could be as subtle as, "I just hope they're doing okay. They seemed unstable when I last saw them." On the surface, it sounds concerned. In reality, it's a well-placed seed meant to bloom into doubt and defensiveness inside your mind. If you hear about it, they've achieved their goal. Your peace is disturbed. The genius of this tactic is that it doesn't require them to be present. They've outsourced the work to others while keeping their own hands clean. And when confronted, they can deny it effortlessly. "I never said that. You must have misunderstood." This gaslighting makes you question not only your memory, but also the intentions of people you thought you could trust. You begin to wonder who's really on your side, and in that uncertainty, they gain ground without lifting a finger. Then comes the selective reappearance. You might see them suddenly liking an old social media post of yours, or commenting something vague like "wow" or "interesting." It's just enough to trigger curiosity, but not enough to warrant a response without looking desperate. They want you to feel the pull of unfinished business, to think, why now? What are they trying to say? They're not there to talk. They're there to remind you they still exist in your world. When that doesn't work, they employ the nostalgia trap. They'll send you something tied to a memory you shared, a photo, a song, an inside joke. These messages aren't about kindness. They're about fishing for a reaction. They know memory is a powerful emotional lever, and they'll pull it just to see if you still respond to their bait. If you do, they'll feel validated, knowing they can still reach inside and stir the parts of you that once cared. This phase can be one of the most dangerous because it plays on your humanity. Even if you've detached, part of you might still feel empathy for them. They might hint at personal struggles or crises, carefully crafted to tug at your compassion. It's not that they want help. They want proof you still care. They will never admit it. But this is desperation masked as vulnerability. And if you step in, you'll quickly see that the old cycle hasn't gone anywhere. The narcissist's last dirty game often includes using third parties as emotional messengers. They might suddenly appear in your social circle through mutual events, birthdays, or gatherings. They won't approach you directly. Instead, they'll linger at the edges, ensuring you see them while pretending they barely noticed you. This creates a strange tension, a silent tug of war where no words are exchanged, but the presence is loud enough to disturb your peace. If you remain unshaken, they sometimes resort to playing the redemption card. They'll present themselves publicly as changed, healed, or enlightened, attending therapy, volunteering, or posting philosophical quotes about growth. The timing is never random. It's meant to spark questions in your mind. Did they finally become the person I wish they were? But here's the truth. True change doesn't need an audience. If their transformation is being broadcast for all to see, it's probably a performance aimed at drawing you back in. In this stage, they also manipulate perception by aligning themselves with people they know you admire or respect. Suddenly, they're collaborating, socializing, or photographed with those individuals. It's a way of silently saying, "Look at me now. See who accepts me." The goal isn't just to impress you, it's to create the illusion that they're thriving in spaces you once thought they couldn't access without you. When none of this gets a response, the narcissist might play the pity card on a grand scale. You'll hear through others that they've been struggling or hurt by how things ended. They paint you as cold, uncaring, even cruel. This is another form of bait designed to provoke you into defending yourself or setting the record straight. But every defense you give, every clarification you make, pulls you back into the game they're desperate to keep alive. What makes their last game so toxic is that it never ends cleanly. Unlike the explosive breakup where boundaries are clear, this tactic is open-ended with no obvious moment to shut the door. It's a slow leak of energy, a constant background hum that keeps your attention tethered to them. And if you're not vigilant, months or even years can pass while they continue to orbit your life without direct contact. Some will even go as far as mirroring your success. If you start a new venture, they'll suddenly have one. If you find a new passion, they'll discover it too. It's not coincidence, it's competition. They want to send the silent message, anything you can do, I can do too. This keeps them in your psychological space, forcing comparisons you never asked for. It's their way of saying, you haven't outgrown me, we're still connected. Another subtle trick is what I call the phantom apology. They'll hint at wanting to make amends without ever actually doing it. Phrases like, "I've been thinking a lot about the past," or "I realize now that I wasn't perfect," sound like an opening for healing. But when you step toward it, you find no real accountability, just vague admissions that lead nowhere. It's not about closure, it's about keeping the door slightly ajar. The silence and shadow game works because it preys on your mind, not your actions. You can block them, unfollow them, and avoid mutual spaces, but they will still find ways to infiltrate your thoughts. And once you realize that the real battle is internal, you start to see their tactics for what they are. Distractions meant to pull you away from your own growth. Your greatest weapon against this game is radical indifference. Not forced, not fake, but genuine detachment that comes from knowing who you are and where you're going. When you truly don't care whether they're thriving, failing, or watching you, you become immune to every move they make. And that immunity isn't built in a day. It's forged in the quiet daily choice to focus on your life instead of their shadow. At the end of the day, the narcissist's last dirty game is nothing without your participation. It's like a chessboard where one player has already walked away. They can keep moving pieces all they want, but the match is over. When you understand that, their silence stops feeling like power and starts feeling like nothing at all. And that's the moment you become truly untouchable. When the narcissist sees that you've built walls they can't climb, they often resort to creating chaos from a distance. This isn't chaos in your immediate life. It's chaos in the social and emotional ecosystem around you. They'll stir tension between you and others by making subtle comments, dropping misleading hints, or exaggerating past situations to cast you in a negative light. It's never direct slander, it's clever insinuation, so if it gets back to you, it sounds like it could have been misunderstood. This way, they still play the innocent party while the damage works quietly in the background. This phase is frustrating because it feels like fighting smoke. You can't catch them in the act, you can't prove their intentions, and yet you feel the shift in the way certain people look at you. This is where their game tries to force you into self-defense mode, hoping you'll start reaching out, clarifying, or over-explaining yourself. But every explanation you give feeds the narrative that you're affected by them, proving to them, and sometimes to others, that they still hold influence over your peace. They might also attempt to own parts of your identity. You'll see them quoting your words, adopting your style, or even presenting your ideas as their own. It's a bizarre mix of flattery and theft. They're essentially trying to merge with your identity so that your success feels like theirs and your uniqueness feels less special. If people see them mirroring you, they hope it creates confusion about who inspired whom. It's psychological territory marking without saying a word. The truth is, they can't stand the fact that you've stepped into a life where they're no longer needed. Their ego interprets your independence as rejection, and rejection is unbearable to them. So they cling to the only control they have left, the ability to disrupt your emotional balance. If they can't stop your growth, they'll try to make you question its value. Sure, you're doing well now, they hope you'll think, but does it even matter if they don't care? One of their most cunning moves is sudden, unexpected kindness. After months of silence, they might send you a heartfelt message, congratulate you on a milestone, or offer genuine-sounding support. It's tempting to believe they've changed, that maybe they've finally recognized your worth. But in the narcissist's playbook, kindness is never without motive. If it comes right after you've achieved something big, it's not coincidence. It's an attempt to reinsert themselves into your story just as it's getting good. The danger in responding to that kindness is that it opens the door they've been knocking on in the shadows. Once they're back inside, they'll quickly remind you why you left in the first place. But because the re-entry started with warmth, you might find yourself questioning whether this time will be different. This is how many people get pulled back into the same cycle, only to discover that nothing has changed except the wrapping. Some narcissists take this game even further by creating fake crises to pull you in. They might hint at health problems, financial trouble, or emotional breakdowns. They rely on your empathy, knowing you're the kind of person who doesn't ignore someone in need. But the crisis is rarely as dire as they make it sound. Once you're emotionally invested again, they've succeeded. The crisis was just the hook. They're there for the control, not the comfort. This is where your discipline gets tested. The old version of you might have rushed in, wanting to fix, comfort, or save. But now, you understand that helping someone who's only using your kindness as a leash will cost you far more than it gives. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to let them handle their own storms, no matter how loudly they try to make you hear the thunder. When the pity ploys and nostalgia traps fail, they often try to provoke you through sheer audacity. You might hear that they've openly mocked you, downplayed your accomplishments, or claimed credit for your influence in their life. This is their way of poking the bear, testing if they can still make you roar. But your silence here is more than strength, it's strategy. Every time you refuse to engage, you rob them of the only currency they have left, your attention. The last dirty game thrives on one principle. You don't need to be in contact to still be in conflict. They've mastered the art of being present without being present, existing in your awareness without your consent. It's why blocking them isn't enough. The true block has to happen in your mind, where they've been living rent-free. And mental eviction isn't about forgetting them, it's about making their presence irrelevant. Once you begin to see their moves for what they are, the illusion of power they hold starts to fade. You stop asking, why would they do that? And start saying, of course they did that. This shift strips their actions of their emotional weight. The game stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like background noise, a noise you can simply choose to ignore. The narcissist's fear in this stage is not your anger, but your disinterest. Anger means they still have a line into your emotions. Disinterest means they've lost their last access point. They know that once you stop reacting, their existence in your world shrinks to zero impact. This terrifies them because for narcissists, irrelevance is worse than defeat. It's annihilation. But here's the twist they never expect. Their last dirty game often becomes your final push into complete freedom. Every failed attempt to provoke you is proof of how far you've come. Every ignored bait is a reminder of your strength. The game they thought would break you becomes the stage where you prove to yourself that they can't touch you anymore. By the time they realize this, it's too late. You've already outgrown the arena they're still playing in. They're stuck recycling old tactics while you've moved on to a life so full that their shadow doesn't even reach you. And that, more than anything, is the ending they can't stand, the one where they're still playing but you've already won. By the time the narcissist realizes their old playbook has failed, they are already cornered by their own desperation. They've tried silence, pity, nostalgia, rumors, indirect messages, yet you remain unshaken. This is when the mask begins to crack, not in front of you, but in their private moments. You'll never see it directly, but behind closed doors, their frustration turns into restless energy. They obsessively replay your last interaction, searching for a lever they can still pull. Finding none, they begin to understand what they've been avoiding. You are no longer theirs to control. In this final stretch, they might attempt one last dramatic gesture, a public display, a long message, a sudden declaration of regret. But unlike before, this isn't backed by confidence. It's a gamble, a last roll of the dice. They hope the shock of the move will bypass your logic and strike at your heart. It's the equivalent of a chess player tipping the king, not as surrender, but as a distraction, hoping you'll make one final mistake before the board is cleared. But here's the moment where you become unshakable. You recognize that nothing they do now is for you. Every word, every move, every performance is for their own survival, not your healing. You no longer take their actions personally because you understand the truth. This was never about love or even hate. It was about power. And now that they have none, everything else is noise. The narcissist will often tell themselves that they could get you back if they really tried. It's their way of protecting their ego from the reality that you've truly moved on. This delusion allows them to live with the loss without fully facing it. But deep down, the truth gnaws at them. You are gone, and there is nothing left for them to hold on to. That silent realization is their real defeat, not a dramatic showdown, but the quiet, crushing knowledge that their influence has expired. What they didn't count on was your transformation. They were prepared for you to be angry, bitter, or defensive. They knew how to handle that. What they weren't ready for was your peace. True peace is unshakable. It doesn't rise to provocation. It doesn't chase closure. It doesn't need to prove anything. Your peace is the one thing they can't manipulate, and it's the weapon they never saw coming. As you step fully into your new life, their shadow fades. Not because they've stopped trying, but because you've stopped noticing. You no longer scan for their moves, no longer wonder what they're thinking, no longer measure your worth by their attention. You've reclaimed every inch of your mental space, and in doing so, you've made them irrelevant. And for a narcissist, irrelevance is the deepest wound they will ever feel. Eventually, their last dirty game burns itself out. Without your reactions to fuel it, the silent tactics, the rumor mills, the nostalgia traps, they all wither. They may still exist somewhere in your periphery, but they're no longer part of your story. They're just a chapter you've already read, a character you've outgrown. And once that shift happens, there's no going back. Your journey now is no longer about them. It's about you. You've learned that freedom isn't just cutting contact. It's cutting the invisible strings that kept you dancing to someone else's tune. You've learned that real strength isn't proving them wrong. It's building a life so rich that proving them wrong isn't even on your mind. You've learned that your power was never in their recognition. It was in your refusal to be defined by their games. The beauty of this stage is that you stop seeing yourself as a survivor of their abuse and start seeing yourself as the architect of your future. You realize that everything they tried to use against you, your empathy, your loyalty, your capacity to care, was never a weakness. It was power they couldn't handle. And now, without their influence distorting it, that power becomes the very thing that drives you forward. They may still watch from a distance, but now it doesn't matter. Whether they cheer for your failure or resent your success, both require them to think about you. And thinking about you means they're still in the cage they built for themselves. Meanwhile, you've stepped out into a world where their opinion has no currency, their voice has no volume, and their presence has no place. The last dirty game a narcissist plays is meant to keep you in orbit around them. But the real victory is when you become your own center of gravity. Your energy no longer revolves around proving, explaining, or defending. It revolves around living, creating, loving, and building without permission. That shift doesn't just break their control, it erases the entire game. In the end, the narcissist's most painful realization is not that you're gone, but that you're free. They can replace you in their life, but they can't replace the version of themselves that existed when they had control over you. That version is gone forever. And with it, the illusion of power they once held. Your freedom becomes a mirror they can't look into without seeing everything they lost. So when you reach that place, when their name doesn't sting, their silence doesn't echo, and their games don't matter, you've not only won, you've ended the game entirely. And the most satisfying part, they can't start it again without your permission. You've become what they feared the most from the very beginning, untouchable. And when you stand there fully in your power, you realize something profound. The last dirty game they played was also their last chance to keep you. And they lost. Not because you fought harder, but because you chose not to fight at all. You walked away, closed the board, and left them to play alone. That is the moment you stop being their former target and start being your own hero. Now the full 60-paragraph script is complete and ready to be turned into a visually gripping, voiceover-driven YouTube video that will keep viewers hooked to the very last second.